Hello, my name is Cristian Peralez, and this is my project. So my project included that I asked the user what vectors he wanted me to use. So here I only asked for only two vectors. So here the vector inputs, the user would have to input them manually and either choose, for the second one, if you wanted a scalar or a vector. You can see you can only do certain things with a vector. You can't divide or multiply with two vectors, but you can do the cross product and dot product. As a scalar, you can't do the cross product or dot product, you can divide and multiply. That's great and all. Now let's see this in action. So it enters 21, 28, and 7. That's correct. Now let's say I want the magnitude of this force right here. As you can see, it plots it on the x axis, y axis, and z axis. And it plots it right here. Let's say you want to know the magnitude of this line right here, which is the red one. Let's say you want to know this. So you just click magnitude. You click it. See, as you can see, it cancels out dot product, because dot product, you cannot find the magnitude of dot product. You can find the magnitude of add, subtraction, cross product. So finds it. Tells you that this line is actually 35.69. Great. Let's go for scalar. So scalar number. What this is? Divides by a scalar. Multiplies by a scalar. Think that covers everything? How it all works now? Okay, so this is the second part of my project where I'm going to be discussing the project template on what the requirements were for this project. So here I needed to mess around with three-dimensional vectors, and I'm going to just give you a rough summary of the introduction, where I needed to create a class called Vector3D on having three properties, x, y, and z, and having all of these as its function: addition, subtraction, multiplication, scalar, division, scalar, dot product, cross product, magnitude. Basically, whatever x, y, and z are, I needed an add, subtract, multiply, division, divide, dot product, cross product, magnitude, depending on the circumstance. Okay, I mean, that's pretty easy and simple. So now let's go to the requirements. Breakdown problem introduction is basically the user interface. So in the menu screen, you're gonna first off see x, y, and z numbers. You need to input these x, y, and z, and click on either doing the job with another vector or a scalar. Click on what job you want the system to do: substitution, subtraction, multiplying, dividing, etc. This depends on what it's either choosing vector or scalar. After all the inputs are in, you just click enter and let the system run. The outputs, however, it would graph the vector. As soon as the enter button is clicked, it would graph the vector and it would display the vector solution in solution. The algorithm was read what the inputs are for x, y, and z, and x2, y2, and z2. If it was another vector, create a vector from these inputs and do the following command. So I would take these numbers, make them into a vector, and add, subtract, multiply, divide, dot product, cross product, or find the magnitude on whatever basically you told the command to do. This is more of like the user needs to. So let's continue off. We were talking about the data requirements now. After all of that, data requirements would you need to input the data. Input data will be used to calculate the final result using whatever method you told the program to use. In output, the output data will be used to display the final solution. And if magnitude is asked, then it will also display magnitude. This is at a high level technical, so now we'll be discussing more about it. So I would be using Matlab for this assignment. I will first make functions for all methods, so addition, multiplying in that class method. These include substitution, subtract, multiplying, yeah. These functions are to be categorized by either if the inputs are scalar or vector. That's something different. Second, I will be using the dry and moderation principles to fix the function to work with one another. Third, I'll be using the app designer from Matlab to connect these functions and edit them to work with the buttons and graphs. Fourth, I'll make sure that the program is running correctly, making sure that if scalar is chosen, to not make dot product or cross product available. However, if vector is chosen, Then to make multiplication division available. 5th, test the program a lot and make sure the inputs align with the result. Basically, test fire it. So this is the pseudocode for the program. So program will have 3 inputs, which include x, y, and z. If scalar vector is chosen, then it will either display x, y, and z inputs or scalar number input, which is what I showed you in part 1. The program will also ask the method it should use to solve your problem. So addition, subtraction, divide, multiplying, dot product, cross product. Product will then ask if you want the magnitude of the final solution. So you click on the bottom magnitude, like how I showed you in part 1. Output solution depending on the method used. Output solution depending on what method used and if magnitude was selected. Output of graph and the final solution and plot in 3D. Okay, so we're going to be talking about our functions now. On what functions helped me critical in this. So UI control and app designer, functions, vectors, sum, and callbacks. Those were all very useful. This is a rough view on how the project was supposed to look like. So instead of like just lines right here, it was supposed to show a little box and actually input there. But I could not insert the y and j and k, and I need to switch it up. Made it a lot easier. This is another version of it, but the scalar button on shows you how it's supposed to work. I did that manually. So these are all the testings. So you needed to open up Matlab, addition is working. These are all passed now because I made sure that all the program was doing everything correctly. So it's supposed to be all good, and it shows you a description on what everything was supposed to do, like the expected results. So recommendations for this project would be a lot of buttons are hidden until you finish the inputs. Basically a hidden fixture, so I don't have to toggle and enable a lot of the buttons. And animation of the graph, basically go in slow motion, describing what's happening. That would have made it a lot better. So all I really used for this was just Matlab help, and that's about it. I just used the Matlab website to actually teach me a little bit about this, and it was just me by myself actually just playing around with it. So I think that's about it. Okay, so this is part 3 of the project, and in this part I would be going into further detail on how I went into this. So let's first go off with how I needed to solve this. Like, how'd you get the answer? So as soon as the enter button is pushed, it would put the x, y, and z of the first vector, and it would put it into, it would go into the vector 3D class. Now it's in there. And it would take the second field, the second vector, and put it into the vector 3D class. It would also take the scalar number. If there's a scalar number, it's going to take it, but it's not going to use it unless there's a method to use it. So this is where I figured out what method is used. So if the add button is on is equal to the button group, then it would do this. So if value is off, then it would do the vectors, but if it's on, it would do the scalar. Same thing with the subtraction button. If it's on, it would do the vector. I mean, if it's off, it would do the vector, but if it's on, it would do the scalar. This is basically how I went into it, slowly and getting everything sorted out. Now, this is how I displayed the answer. Went into text. I did it in text instead of the other way because I needed input y, j, and k. Now, getting the results of the vector's magnitude. This is, if it's enabled, I would do it. But if it's disabled, I would just submit nothing. How I graphed a 3D plot. This is how I graphed it. Use the app UI axis. Okay, so now I'll be describing how the app scalar button works. So if it's on, it should disable and enable a few things, and if it's off, it should enable and disable a few things. Same with magnitude, how I did that. Basically just turned it on turned off a few things and made the editable on, editable off. Same thing with here, magnitude, value is equal to 1. If it's equal to 1, basically it's telling you that it's on. If it's equal to 0, it's off. So that's why I just use if and else. Same thing with magnitude. Needed to work out with the bug fixes. And I did the app add button dot value 1. Basically turn the app button, because that's a glitch. You can basically enable multiply and it won't change. So I did that. That was one of my bug fixes. Now let's go into vectors 3D, where the actual classes, properties x, y, and z, and these are all the functions I use. So I basically turn these into the properties. So object.x, object.y, and object.z. So now it gathers all the information using that. So these are all the functions where it turns it into a vector, adds scalar, subvector, subtract scalar, multiply scalar, divide scalar, dot product, and cross product is the hardest one. And then this is finding the magnitude. And I think that covers how everything you need to know, so you can kind of create everything for this. I mean, I could have worked harder maybe on it, but I think that's about it. Well, my name is Christian, and I hope you enjoy my project.